Hello and welcome to today's webinar on doing descendancy research. My name is Ginevra Morse. I'm the Vice President of Education and Programming here at American Ancestors and New England Historic Genealogical Society. I will be your moderator for today's program. American Ancestors and New England Historic Genealogical Society is a nonprofit organization supported by our members and donors. We provide resources and expertise in nearly all aspects of family history and are pleased to offer such programming for our members and friends around the world. I do want to note that we are broadcasting from our homes to your home with various limitations and distractions. We do apologize in advance if there are any interruptions from our end, and we thank you for your patience. Even if we were to lose the connection, not to worry, you will still have access to a full recording on our website as well as our YouTube channel. So giving today's session is genealogist Hallie Borstel. Hallie has a BA in history with minors in art history and German language, as well as a master's degree in historic preservation. She joined the staff of American Ancestors last year after several years of working in architectural restoration and preservation. She previously worked at the New York Genealogical and Biographical Society, the West Virginia Railroad Museum, and the Bender Library at American University. Her research interests include Germany and German-speaking regions, Norway, New York City, westward migration, immigration history, and 19th century America. Hallie also volunteers for a group called the Unclaimed Persons Forum, which aims to help coroners identify the next of kin of unclaimed decedents. So in the next 45 minutes or so, we'll explain what descendancy research is and how it differs from more traditional ancestral genealogical research. We'll provide examples of when it is useful and point to a number of resources that are particularly helpful when doing this type of research. I do want to preface that that discussion of resources by saying that everything that we'll be showing today is publicly available information. So that's important to keep in mind. At any point during the presentation, feel free to type your question into the panel to the right of your screen. We'll address those at the end. There is a syllabus for this session that can be purchased from our online bookstore. You'll find a link to this downloadable PDF in your reminder emails, as well as in your follow-up email after today's broadcast. We're also recording this event, and starting tomorrow, you can freely go back and review any of today's content from the presentation on our website as well as our YouTube channel. So if you missed something on today's first listen, don't worry, you can always go back and review the recording later. All right, so without further ado, I'll turn things over to Hallie.
Thank you, Ginevra. It's great to be here today talking to all of you about descendancy research, something that's a little bit different from traditional genealogy, but I actually spend quite a bit of my time working on both here and for personal projects. And I'm excited to share all of my tips and tricks with you guys. So let's start by defining descendancy research. What exactly are we going to be talking about here today? So when you do descendancy research, you are working from the past to the present. In traditional genealogy, we work from the known to the unknown, and that typically means the present to the past. So we're doing the opposite when we do descendancy research. So we'll go back in time several generations, pick an individual and bring that one individual's line to the present day on all branches. And in this way, we will end up locating living relatives. So typically you go back in time, 1 generation, 2 generations, maybe 10 generations, and then bring that line forward to the present day. And just to help you visualize this, we have on the left-hand side a sort of traditional tree where it's very small at the base and gets bigger as you go back in time and add more ancestors to your tree. We're just flipping that idea on its head, so to speak. So we pick one person back in time, and as we bring that person's descendants forward, our tree grows bigger and bigger and bigger as we get closer to the present day. Why might you be doing descendancy research? Well, there's quite a few reasons you might find yourself working on this type of project, and I'll talk a little bit about each of these in detail in a few minutes. So first of all, you might be just trying to build out your ancestors' families. This research might be part of a family association project or other study project. It might be part of a project to uncover DNA connections. You might be trying to locate the next of kin of an individual. You want to find some previously unknown cousins, track down family heirlooms and stories, or break down other brick walls. So first of all, building out your ancestors' families. This will help you provide context for the bigger story of your family. It'll let you fill in your tree and research collateral lines and help you understand generational relationships. This is a great way to prep for a family reunion or for the holidays. And it will also help you answer that question, whatever happened to, for any ancestor in your tree. So I had this question a few years ago. I wanted to know what happened to my Granny Annie's half-brothers. So Granny Annie is actually my great-grandma, and in doing my genealogy, I found out that she had 2 older half-brothers. Nobody knew anything about them. And so I decided to do some descendancy research to figure out what happened to them. So on the right-hand side, you can see how I brought the lines down to the present day for those individuals, and I was able to answer this question, what happened to them? Descendancy research is a big part of family association or study projects. And the goal of this type of project will be to locate all the descendants of one individual. A good example of this, and sort of a supersized example of this at the same time, is the Mayflower Families Through 5 Generations project, also known as the Silver Books, which is a project of the General Society of Mayflower Descendants. So each volume is essentially its own descendancy research project, taking the descendants or the Mayflower passengers and bringing their descendants down through 5 or 6 generations. In doing this type of project, you can find out how many descendants one person had. And there are a lot of groups out there for the descendants of famous or notable individuals. There may also be groups out there for descendants of not so famous individuals. I've got a few examples up on the screen right now. Most of you are probably familiar with the General Society of Mayflower Descendants. Some other ones I've come across recently are the descendants of the William Dawes Who Rode Association and the John Steer Family Association. And I just want to make clear that applying to be a member of one of these organizations is not a part of descendancy research, but these organizations often aim to document all the descendants, whether the members, whether those people become members or not. So one similar project that I have had the chance to work on here at NEHGS is for the John Steer Family Association. Myself and some of my colleagues have been helping them locate descendants of John Steer, who was an early immigrant to Rhode Island who lived between 1634 and 1724. And right now our database of descendants of John Steer includes over 10,000 direct descendants. Descendancy research can also be really important when you are delving into the world of DNA and genetic genealogy. There's sort of 2 ways that you can use descendancy research in combination with your DNA project. One of these is to test out a hypothesis. So you might be trying to locate a cousin for Y-DNA testing or to compare autosomal DNA. The other thing you might be doing is trying to determine how your DNA matches are related to you. So I recently did a DNA test and discovered that I had a lot of people who related to this one couple, Baker Man Pounds and Marianne Bowles. So I have been undertaking a descendancy research project on my own to try and figure out all the descendants of Baker and Marianne and figure out how my family might fit into their family, which is what you can see here on the screen. This is another example of how I'm trying to help a client test out a hypothesis by doing descendancy research in combination with DNA testing. We have this question, who is the father of Moses Barnes? And through the paper trail and the historic record, I believe that Lemuel Barnes is his father, and I believe that Lemuel Barnes is also the father of Elijah Barnes. We know that Lemuel Barnes is the father of Ebenezer Barnes. So by finding living male descendants of all three of these individuals, they can take Y-DNA tests and we can compare the results and see if we can prove or disprove this hypothesis. Locating next of kin is another application for descendancy research. You can determine who is legally a person's closest relative, and this is something you'll end up doing if you're involved with matters of inheritance and heirship. The definition of next of kin does vary from state to state. That's something to be aware of. And this type of research is often used when a deceased person has no spouse, no issue, and no siblings. So you go back in time to the parents or grandparents and bring the line forward. And just to give you an example, this is the next of kin chart for the state of Massachusetts. It's color coded and there's a numerical numbering system here to show you how to determine who somebody's closest relative is. In doing descendancy research, whether you want to get in touch with people or not, you will uncover unknown cousins, and hopefully if you reach out, you'll be able to learn some more about family heirlooms and family stories. By talking to these distant cousins, you can compare research notes, exchange photos, and swap stories and add to your personal family history collection. So what resources are out there to do a descendancy research project? Well, a lot of the same resources are available as when doing traditional genealogy. We're all doing a lot of work online and remotely these days, so websites like AmericanAncestors.org, Ancestry.com, and FamilySearch.org are all great places to start a descendancy research project. But you can also do research in person at places like a family history center or library, or your local or state archives, town or city clerk, courthouse, etc. You're going to be using a lot of the same types of records as when you do traditional genealogy as well. Vital records, census records, land records, city directories, church records, and cemetery records are all great resources for this type of research. There are a few types of records that can be really, really important to descendancy research, and I'm going to focus on those in this presentation. So I'm going to be talking about things like probate and court records, newspapers, and then some next-gen sort of tools, online people finder websites, and social media, etc., that can help you with this. Your ultimate goal in descendancy research is to use the records to document each generation, but you're just moving forwards in time instead of moving backwards in time. So probate records are really key to descendancy research, particularly if you're starting in the 18th or 19th century. The types of records that we're talking about when we refer to probate are typically wills and the administration of estates. These records will name heirs of an individual who are often that person's next of kin, and relationships are often, but not always, explicitly stated. Many probate records are available on FamilySearch.org, often as browse-only files, and these are typically arranged at the county level. You should keep in mind that probate records do not exist for everyone, but when they are there, they can be very helpful. And there are a lot of different items that sort of fall under this category of probate records. And some of those are the will, a bond, a letter of administration or testamentary, and an inventory. And you might find these records organized in a few different ways. Sometimes this will be a packet, docket, or file, and sometimes it will be part of a bound volume. There are some clues that you can look for in probate records. These are really important because for the pre-vital record era, so typically the 18th and the early 19th century, probate records may be the only documentation explicitly stating a relationship between two individuals, for example, a father and a son. You should keep in mind that the administrator or executor of an estate is usually very closely related to the deceased. The most common things that you will see is that the administrator or executor is the son, widow, brother, father, or brother-in-law of the deceased. And married names for daughters, which sometimes come in the form of the son-in-law's name, can also often be found in probate records. So let's take a look at an example. This is actually from a probate book index from Trumbull County, Ohio. And I have highlighted the relevant names here. So on the left, we see the name of the decedent, Ebenezer Barnes. And on the right, we get some information about his estate. So if we were to read through this, we would see he does not have a will. But there are other ways his estate is being settled, and here we get references to the volume and page number we can go to, but we also have the names of the administrators of his estate listed right here. Those are Henry Barnes and Calvin Barnes. And here we have an example of a will. This is a will of Henry Barnes of Warren in Trumbull County, Ohio. And this is a great example of how relationships can be explicitly stated in wills. Henry actually does something very interesting here. He sets up a provision for erecting gravestones for his deceased mother and 2 of his sisters. So right off the bat, we get 3 relationships to people who have predeceased him. But we also get the name of one of his heirs, who is his brother, Lyman. So this is a great example of how we see those relationships clearly laid out in wills. Now, there are other events that are handled by the same courts that handle probate. The most common things you will see are adoption, guardianship, dower rights, and divorce. And here I have an example showing the application for the appointment of a guardian for a minor child. This is a minor child of Calvin Barnes, and this record actually gives us the birth date of the child. It says he will be 12 years old on the 27th of August, 1864. This is a great clue. This is a key piece of information for us, but it's also pretty unusual to get an exact date. Often in guardianship records, the child is simply referred to as a minor. Newspapers are another fantastic resource when doing descendancy research. Of course, there's the obituary, but there's also a lot more you can get out of other types of newspaper articles. And I'm going to talk through a couple examples of both of those. So obituaries are really key to descendancy research, especially for 20th century research when you get specific names of the descendants mentioned. So you will see in obituaries the names of descendants and the names of in-laws, and also places of residence for the deceased and family members, which can help us locate living relatives. But beyond the obituary, we can look at things like birth and marriage announcements, promotions that are mentioned in the newspaper, anniversaries, etc., to get a lot more information. So we should always be reading newspaper articles closely because family members may be named in unexpected places. Where might you find newspapers? Well, there are quite a few online digital newspaper archives. Some of these are newspapers.com, genealogybank.com, and newspaperarchive.com, all of which need a subscription to view. Chronicling America is a website from the Library of Congress, which contains digital newspapers up until the 1960s, which is free. It's a great resource. And there are also a few databases that we have institutional access to here at American Ancestors. Those are early American newspapers and 19th century US newspapers. Your state or local library may also have digital or physical newspaper archives available for your use. When you're looking at obituaries, the best case scenario is that the obituary will name all the children and their spouses with the last names of the spouses and give full names for any children and grandchildren, as well as places of residence for all individuals. That's the best case scenario. It doesn't always happen. This is actually much more common in recent obituaries that were published originally on the web, because there's no need to think about word count and how much physical space it's going to take up on a page. So here's an example of that best case scenario obituary. This is an obituary for Russ Engel, who died in 2009. And I'm just showing a few snippets from the obituary, but this third paragraph here is really what's the most important for our purposes. I couldn't highlight every descendant mentioned because I would just highlight the whole paragraph, but this is a really great example. It's showing us the full names of all of his children and grandchildren and the places of residence of all of them. So this is going to be really important in creating a family tree for this person. And I went ahead and did that. I created a basic tree for Russ Engel. So you can see here that I've been able to build it out quite a bit just using the information in the obituary. And I've also placed the residences of the individuals mentioned just so I can keep track of it. In the bottom right-hand corner, I just have 6 individuals that I wasn't able to place. These are women who are granddaughters and have married names, so it's not clear at the moment where they fit in. But I'm going to just save that information off to the side and do some more research, and hopefully I'll be able to tie them back in to this family group with a little more work. Now, I mentioned that you can get a lot from articles that are not obituaries. So let's say I'm researching the Carter family. I'm researching Edward Carter, and I know the name of his wife and children. I know his birth date, but I'm going to try and see what else I can find in the newspapers about him. So I'm searching on newspapers.com. And even though I'm searching for Edward Carter, what I get is this marriage announcement for his daughter, Anne. And there are a lot of names mentioned in here that will help me expand my tree. So I get the name of Anne's husband, John Akins. But if I read through the article, I also get the names of Anne's brothers-in-law. So in one paragraph mentions the bride's sisters, Mrs. Richard Dubois Phillips and Mrs. Meredith McFarlane. And another paragraph mentions her brothers-in-law, Mr. R.D. Phillips and Mr. Meredith McFarlane. So in one article, I've actually gotten the name of all of 3 of Edward Carter's sons-in-law. And I'm going to go ahead and add John Akins as the husband of Anne Carter to my tree. I don't quite know where Richard and Meredith fit in because they weren't identified specifically with their wife, but I'm going to do a little bit more research right now and see if I can attach them either to Sarah or Gertrude. So looking around in some vital record databases, I am able to find that Sarah Carter married Richard Dubois Phillips. And I can add that to my tree, and by process of elimination, I know that Meredith McFarlane married Gertrude Carter. Now, depending on the type of project that I'm doing, I'm probably going to want to find the documentation for that, just so that my tree is complete, this generation is complete. But you can see how I was able to extract a lot of information from that one marriage announcement and then back it up with further research in vital records. Birth announcements can also be a good resource. However, they often do not give the name of the newborn child. So this is an example of that. I was researching James W. Heisman, again on newspapers.com, and I came across this birth announcement for his twin daughters. While it does not give the names of the 2 newborn twin girls, it does actually give me quite a bit of information about James's immediate family. I get the name of his wife and his 2 older children, Patty and Janet. So once again, I can create a basic family tree from this one birth announcement. So I had the information about James's parents already, and now I can expand it with the name of his wife, 2 of his daughters, and the fact that he had another 2 children. And still looking through the newspaper archives for James Heasman, I find this marriage announcement for his daughter, Paula Jean. Now, she wasn't a name that I had before, but if I read through this article, I see that one of her sisters is mentioned as Pamela, her twin. So that tells me that the 2 twins that I found in the birth announcement are Paula Jean and Pamela. And I get the names of the 2 other sisters again, but here I get their married names. So now we have Patricia Burney and Janet Cleveland. So once again, I'm going to add this information to the tree, and I'm okay with adding a couple blanks that I'll go back and fill in. So I'm just going to add that Patricia's husband is a Mr. Burney, and once I figure out his name, I'll go in and edit that information. So sometimes, even though you're focused on one particular line, you're bringing that one branch down, you can use the in-laws to help find your line. So let's look at this Carter family again. I've done a little bit more research. I know that Anne Carter and John Akins had 4 children, Paul, Stephen, Kate, and Mary. And I know that Paul married a woman named Allison Greer and Mary married a man named Alan Slade. And I'm trying to still bring this line to the present day, but researching the Carter and Akins families, I haven't had too much luck. I do have Anne Carter Akins's obituary, but here's my problem. It mentions her 6 grandchildren, but it doesn't tell me their last names or which of the 4 children they belong to. I simply know that Anne is the grandmother of Louise, Tina, Karen, Julianne, Lisa, and John. So my tree right now looks something like this. I know all of these people are related, I just don't know how. And this is where the in-laws comes in. I'm going to go ahead and look for information about Allison Greer's family and see if I can find overlap. And that's exactly what I find in this obituary for Marguerite Greer. It mentions that she is the mother of Mrs. J.P.C. Akins, also known as Allison, and the grandmother of Louise and Tina Akins. So now I know that Louise and Tina, who were 2 of the 6 names that I had, belong to both the Greer family and the Akins family. They are the children of Allison Greer and Paul Akins. So I can add them to my tree and keep working to find out where the other 4 grandchildren fit in. So you're probably asking yourself now, I've brought the line down to a living cousin. Now what do I do? Well, this is where you turn to some of those next-gen tools, some online resources for finding the living. And these are all drawn from public information. They're available free to the public. They're out there on the internet. You just have to know where to look. So I'm going to talk about each of these in turn, but just to give you an overview of the few resources we'll be covering in the next little bit, we're going to talk about online directories such as whitepages.com, people finder websites like Spokeo, Been Verified, and True People Search, social media profiles. There are also recent obituary websites you can turn to, the U.S. Public Records Index, tax assessment and property assessment websites, court records, and a good old Google search can all help you find living people. So whitepages.com can be used like a phone book or a city directory to find the contact information for somebody once you already know someone's name and approximate location. Whitepages will also provide you with the individual's approximate age, some former residences, and possible family members or housemates. This is a free website, but you can pay for an extended report. If you start searching on whitepages.com, you'll notice a little button appears when you're looking at somebody's profile, which says unlock full report. And that's when it'll ask you to log in and give them your credit card information. Spokeo.com is similar to White Pages, but it will also include some information about online profiles, like possible email addresses and social media accounts. So like White Pages, you can pay for an advanced report, or how they phrase it is you can unlock court and personal records with a payment. Spokeo does not do well with individuals who have more than one given name or surname. They really want you to be searching with just one first name and one last name. And sites like Spokeo and a lot of these other people finders can be bad at differentiating between two people with the same name. So these should always be used in conjunction with other types of research. So here's an example of the thing I mentioned on the previous slide. Spokeo doesn't do a good job if somebody has more than one name. I was researching somebody named Eleanor Scott Gilbert. It seems like she went by that set of 3 names as her legal name. But on Spokeo, when I try and search for her, no matter how I enter the name, it always redirects me to Eleanor Scott in Gilbert, Arizona. So it's just having trouble taking in that much information. BinVerified.com is another one of these people finder websites. BinVerified says that they do 7 different things for you: a reverse phone lookup, an email lookup, an address lookup, a username search, vehicle lookup, or a search for unclaimed money. I find that on BinVerified, you hit a paywall or a login page pretty quickly, but you can typically view basic results for free. So I've got an example of a search result page right here. And this is a free to view this page. So we do get quite a bit of information, but if I try and click to view the individual profile for any of these people, it is going to ask me to pay. It's actually going to ask me for my email address first and say it's creating a report for me, but I can't actually view that report until I buy a subscription or purchase a one-time pass. True People Search, another one of these websites. This is a free phone number, current address, associated names, possible relatives, previous addresses type of profile that it creates for individuals. There's always a link to pay for a background report on True People Search, but that'll take you to a third-party website, just something to be aware of. True People Search, I found, usually notes when an individual is deceased. It gives email addresses, but these do not always seem to be correct, and it gives dates for previous addresses, but those also do not seem to always be correct. So I was playing around on True People Search recently, and I was pretty surprised by how accurate the phone numbers and addresses were for people. But in these other 2 areas, email addresses and the dates associated with previous residences, seemed to be way off based on the information that I knew about close family members and friends that I had had for a long time. So this is reliable to an extent. And here's just an example of the homepage. It looks quite a lot like whitepages.com. You simply put in a person's name and approximate location and perform a search. The U.S. Public Records Index is a great resource for sort of late 20th century finding living people. And the 3 databases that I am talking about, that I'm putting under this one header of U.S. Public Records Index, are actually something called the U.S. Public Records Index Volume 1 and U.S. Public Records Index Volume 2 on ancestry.com, as well as a database on familysearch.org called United States Public Records 1970 to 2009. And the information available in these 3 databases is compiled from telephone directories, property tax assessment, credit applications, and other public records. So if we go back to this obituary, which gave us a lot of information about people's residences, we can get a little bit more information on these people by using the U.S. Public Records Index. So if I do a search of the U.S. Public Records Index for Karen Langendorfer, I get a hit for Ocean Park, Washington, because that was mentioned in her father's obituary. I am fairly certain this is the right person. If I click through to the profile, I get some more pieces of information. Because the U.S. Public Records Index was compiled from a bunch of different resources, not all of the results will have the same level of detail. A lot of the times you will just see a name and an address without a birth date, residence date, or phone number. But there's something else really cool we can do with the U.S. Public Records Index, which is search by address. So this will let me see who else has lived at this address, either at the same time as Karen or within this span of decades that we're looking at in this database. So what I'm going to do is put in the town as the lived-in location and restrict the search to exact. And then I'm going to put the street address as the keyword, and I'm putting that street address in quotations and also restricting that search to exact. And I get a few hits when I do this search. And if you remember from the tree, I did have Karen married to somebody named Bob with a son, Jason. So this looks really great. But now I get birth dates for all three individuals, which I did not have before. So using People Finder websites is a great way to get clues or hints, but you should then cross-reference those against other sources. And similarly, you may want to cross-reference U.S. Public Records Index results with other sources because they do date from sort of the end of the 20th century. A good option for cross-referencing is looking at property assessor or tax assessor records, and these can often be found online on the website of the property assessor or tax assessor. So you can view the owner's names on these records and determine if the property has recently been sold. You may also see if there's an alternate mailing address for the owner. The property assessor or tax assessor could be located at the town, county, or state level. It really depends on the geographic location you're interested in, and the availability of these records online is also dependent on the geographic location. In some instances, you may need to search by the address rather than the owner name, but if you've gone through the Public Records Index or white pages and you're trying to cross-reference, you should already have that information when you get to this step. So the property records, property assessor websites can look a variety of different ways. I've chosen to show you the Davidson County and Nashville, Tennessee website. I think it's a pretty good representation of what is out there. So this is the website of the assessor of property, and we're able to search here without logging in, without creating an account, anything like that. And it gives us an option to search by 3 different ways: owner, address, or map and parcel. And we're going to go ahead and search by owner name. So when I put in the name of an individual such as Alan Smith, I get 3 results. It seems like 2 of these are the same individual and one of them is another man. And we'll just take a look at one of these so you can get an idea of what a property assessor report looks like. So right here, we mostly get information about the property, which isn't super important for us as genealogists, but we do want to check out a few things on this report. We want to check out the name of the current owner and see if more than one individual is listed, because that would indicate probably a close family member, a spouse, or a child or parent. We want to check to see if the mailing address is the same as the property address, or perhaps it's a PO box or something. And then we just want to see if the property has been sold recently, which might indicate that other information we're finding on other websites is perhaps not current. Some court records are available online, and these can be useful because they may mention family members. So records from about 1980 to the present, you can sometimes find online, and this can help you confirm things like a birth date, a middle name or initial, and a place of residence. These might also indicate a divorce or the existence of children. For example, in a divorce record, sometimes you will see that the divorce is referred to as a divorce either with or without minor children. You will also often see aliases listed. So perhaps you're looking for John James Smith, and you find a court record that says he goes by the name Jimmy Smith. So now you've got another name to search for. And the availability of the court records will really depend on the location in which you're working. Social media profiles can be used as a way to verify the identity of somebody and as a means of communication, 2 in 1. Facebook and LinkedIn are, I think, in my opinion, the best resources, the best types of social media platform out there when you're doing descendancy research, although there are more social media platforms out there than I can count right now. So if you're looking at a Facebook profile, trying to determine if this is the person you're interested in, there are a few places you want to check. You want to check the About section for their current location, their hometown, or the education, which might tell you where else they lived previously, if they list their high school or college. You'll want to check the family and relationships section of a Facebook profile because some people do list family members. They might list their children, their cousins, aunts, uncles, etc. Right there on their social media profile, on their Facebook profile. And you can check the friends section to search for other people that you've confirmed as relatives or who you think might be relatives, or just to search for the same surname and see who else is on their friends list that might be a family member. You can look at LinkedIn to contact a person or determine their approximate place of residence, or maybe find a business website for them. Privacy settings can inhibit how fruitful a search of social media profiles is. And sometimes, again, it can be helpful to look for the spouse as well as the line carrier. This is particularly true if you're looking for a man. You might want to look for his wife on Facebook because it does seem like women tend to be more active and more prolific social media users than men. If you're comfortable digging deeper on social media, it can be helpful. Reading through photos and comments can provide clues to family history. Social media is a place that people go to talk about themselves and things that are happening in their lives. In particular, sharing old photos and memories is a popular thing to do on social media. People also create memorials for deceased loved ones, and they post about birthdays and anniversaries, as well as holidays like Siblings Day, Father's Day, Mother's Day, Grandparents' Day, etc. So in this example that I have up on the screen right now, this is an old photo somebody's sharing, and in the caption, they're saying it's their 32nd wedding anniversary. So all I have to do is look at the date the post was created and subtract 32, and then I know the date of this couple's marriage. You might also find yourself doing some general internet search engine searches when doing descendancy research. I do this all the time, particularly if I've hit a brick wall with all of these other options. A lot of people are familiar with Google as a search engine, and I will say that although I tend to go to other search engines for certain things, Google does seem to be the best at finding people for me. Google search will often direct you to people finder websites like some of the ones I mentioned, plus others that I did not, because there are so many of this type of website out there. It'll also direct you to social media profiles. You don't necessarily have to go into Facebook to search for a person on Facebook. It may help you locate small town newspapers, something that hasn't been made part of a big newspaper archive so far. And a good tip for searching on general search engines is to put the name in quotes. So I have quote John Smith, end quote. And if I want to try and get a little more specific, what I'm going to do is add the location or spouse's name outside of the quotes, as you can see here on the screen. And just before we wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about organizing your research, because it's really important, just like any genealogy project, that you keep yourself organized. So you can keep track of descendants the same way you would keep track of your ancestors. You probably have a preferred method of doing this, whether it's a pen and paper and file folder system, or an online tree or family tree software. You may want to consider what your ultimate goal is before you get too far into this. There are a lot of options for online trees. We have American Ancestries at our website. Also, there's ancestry.com, WikiTree, and Jenny. And these are great because you can take them with you anywhere. But family tree software like Roots Magic, Family Tree Maker, Reunion, or Mac Family Tree will give you a lot more options for generating reports. So if a printed report is what you're looking for, you may want to look into one of these options and start keeping your research there before you get too far into the project. On our website, we have several guides for getting started in genealogy, staying organized, picking out a software program, and I'd urge you all to go check those out. We also have a section with downloadable blank charts, family group sheets, family history interview questions, and other questionnaires and things like that to help you stay organized and give you some good tips for doing your genealogy project. So here's an example of some of the downloadable forms from our website. We have this questionnaire which you can send to family members, either ones that you know well or ones you've just learned about, and to try and get information from them, make sure that your research is all current and up to date, and some interview questions. When you do meet those cousins, you want to learn a little bit about their family, and this is a good way to get started. Some general research tips for you. You want to be sure you keep track of sources and that you read and analyze articles carefully and extract all available data. You want to cross-reference less reliable websites with more reliable ones, like we saw checking the property assessor website to make sure we had the right address. You can use scrap paper to keep track of what you're doing, and don't be afraid to enter tentative info into your database. As long as you mark it in some way to show that it hasn't been verified, you can always come back and edit it later. And finally, some tips for communicating with the new cousins that you've found. So of course, there's the option of doing written communication versus a phone call. I advocate for reaching out in writing. First, we all are a little bit skeptical these days of the unknown phone number, that phone call coming in where you don't know who it is. And I think people are more receptive to receiving a letter or an email. Messages through genealogy sites may be the most productive because you know the people on those websites are interested in their family history, and they're probably going to be receptive to sharing and talking to new people. So websites like Ancestry, WikiTree, and other sites may be a great place to look for those cousins. In the first message you send, you want to be sure you identify yourself and state your intention, but not give away too much information. And you should always let somebody know the best way to get in touch with you, whether it's through ancestry.com, email, or phone. And finally, you should remember to be patient. Sometimes people need to think over what you've sent them, or they may not check their online profiles as much as you do. And always be polite when you're sending these messages. And I think that about wraps it up for us here. And we're going to now open the floor for questions.
All right. Well, thank you, Hallie. So yes, go ahead and type your questions into the question panel. We'll try to get through as many as we can in the next 10 minutes or so. So first of all, Michael asks, you showed several trees throughout your presentation, kind of working things out and figuring out, which child belongs to which parent, and what software were you using to create those trees, and is that something that you kind of recommend to do, or did you just do that for the presentation? How do you organize those trees for yourself?
Yeah, sure. So those exact trees are things I created for this presentation. And I mentioned at the very end using scrap paper because those trees that I made in PowerPoint for this presentation today are exactly what I would do on a blank piece of paper as I'm running through vital records and newspapers. I would be sketching out these little trees and putting people off to the side and question marks and dashed lines. And then once I had everything neat and tidy, I would go and enter it into my whatever family tree software program I was using. If it's a personal project, it's probably going to be adding it to my ancestry.com tree. But I've also worked with Family Tree Maker and Roots Magic, but I do often do a scrap paper little sketch of a tree while I'm working through some difficult problems.
All right. And Shelley asks or says that I've extended some families to third and fourth cousins, but it's difficult to keep track of those families, especially when names are reused over and over. Do you have suggestions on how to file or store that information so it's kind of easier to retrieve?
Sure. When you're doing this type of project and you come across a family name that gets used over and over again, it can be really confusing. My best tips in those scenarios are to make sure that you have the full names of all the individuals. So making sure you use a middle initial because people might have a different middle initial. You might have John J versus John C, and that will help you keep track of those people. Or perhaps there are nicknames that you can use. Another thing you might want to do is if you create a report through one of these software programs, it will give you options for different numbering systems. And then every person in your tree will get assigned a number. Of course, you have to then start thinking about the people in terms of numbers. But I was working with a client recently on a descendancy research project. He had been working on it for so long. There was this one guy he just referred to as Samuel number 10. And it took me a little while to pick up on what that was, but there's so many Samuels in this tree that for him, he had identified this one particular person with the number associated with him in this family tree report. So that's another way to go about it. But if you're having trouble sorting out two people of the same name, I recommend setting up a timeline for the two individuals and laying out all the events. And then you can see where you might have accidentally misassigned an event to somebody. This can also help you if you're not sure if somebody is one person or two separate people with the same name.
All right. And Madeline asks, the People Finder websites that you showed, are those for the US only? If so, are there other or similar sites for international use?
So they're pretty US specific. There are a couple white pages type websites out there for different countries, but I haven't found any People Finder type websites like Spokeo for different countries. I think the information that's available to us publicly here in the US through things like property tax assessments, it's a lot harder to get a hold of that information in other countries, and that means that there aren't as many websites out there that are basically capitalizing on the existence of that information.
No, Geraldine asks, which People Finder site do you think would be the most useful to pay for if only paying for one of them? And maybe you could talk a little bit about, like, do you end up paying for the reports, or do you typically just use kind of the free information? What's your experience with that?
So I personally have never paid for any reports from these People Finder websites. I've always found that the free information is all that I need, especially because I'm comfortable going to other websites to check, to cross-reference that data. I know that in this volunteer group that I work with, the Unclaimed Persons Forum, there are some people that have subscriptions to been verified, and they will use those to sort of help us out. But a lot of the times you can get all of the information you need from the free report.
All right. And Bill asks if you have any tips for asking for information, often personal information from relatives that you don't know yet, that you don't know yet personally.
Sure. So I would say you want to start by having a casual conversation before jumping into some of those more personal details, getting to know the person a little bit and really explaining why you're interested in what you're asking or what you plan on asking them can be helpful to sort of break the ice. And at the same time, I suggested not giving too much away in your first message, but letting them know some information about you may make them more receptive to sharing details about their life with you.
All right. Several questions about DuckDuckGo. I think you mentioned that in terms of Google versus DuckDuckGo. What is that? I think several people haven't heard of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so DuckDuckGo is another search engine, and they say that they are much more aware of privacy settings than Google, and they're trying not to use as many cookies in doing research. DuckDuckGo is something I became aware of in about the past year or so, and since then I've been seeing billboards and advertisements for them. And actually, I do like using DuckDuckGo on a day-to-day basis, but I have found that they're so good at not using cookies and not throwing other people's information at you that if I am trying to find a person, I need to turn to a different search engine to do that, because I will get so many more results relating to individuals if I'm doing a Google search rather than a DuckDuckGo search.
Thanks. And another question kind of in regards to communicating with newly found relatives. How do you maybe do you have any suggestions on how to deal with an individual who is reluctant to share information with you? I mean, do you push them? What are your suggestions there?
I would never say that you should be pushy about getting information. You do have to respect a person's privacy. I think the best thing to do if somebody is a little reluctant is make sure that you've made your intentions clear. If you have to restate them in a slightly different manner or offer up some more personal details about yourself, that might make the person a little bit more willing to share their life with you, their life story with you. And if not, you do in the end just have to respect that, because it may not be important to them in the same way it is to you. And you may have to live with only having the little details of what you could find online without having a real conversation with them.
And certainly, as you discussed, descendancy research is great for DNA projects, especially when you're trying to kind of map out the connections with your matches. If you're trying to find individuals to take a DNA test, because you've identified that that they have the DNA that you need, how do you kind of frame? Do you have any suggestions on how you might frame that communication? Is that somewhat different? Are there some best practices? I mean, would you pay for that person's kit? Would you, any suggestions there?
Sure. In a lot of cases, I think if you are able to pay for somebody else's kit, that you should offer to do that. I know that's worked well for other people in the past. And you keep in mind that, for example, if you want to do Y-DNA testing, there's only certain people that can do that. And, so you say, I will handle everything. I really just need your saliva in order to help me. But for the most part, you want to keep the same basic ground rules in mind. DNA testing, I think you want to come clear about that pretty early on if that's your intention. So sticking with state your intention at the beginning, but with the DNA testing, you may need to lay out the whole research line, why that person is, the only person that can help you do this, or why they're only one of two people that can help you do this, and provide them as much information as they need about the project in order to make them feel comfortable about it.
All right. Well, unfortunately, I think that's all the time that we have. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. I know that we didn't get to everything today, but certainly there are a few options if you'd like to continue this discussion. For example, if you'd like more help with your research project, whether that's ancestral research or a descendancy project, you may consider scheduling a one-on-one consultation with one of our experts. You can learn more by contacting us at consultations@nehgs.org, or you may have a project or you've hit a brick wall and you need us to do research on your behalf. So you can certainly hire our research services team, and you can learn more by contacting research@nehgs.org. And then I also want to tell you about one of our services that has recently been expanded, and that's our Chat with a Genealogist or Ask a Genealogist service. And that's, you can learn more by going to americanancestors.org/chat. We have our experts kind of at the other end of that chat window, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. This service is open to everyone. It's free. And once again, it can be accessed there on that URL. I will be including all of this information in my follow-up email to you later today. And as the holidays are right around the corner, you can also give the gift of family history while receiving a gift for yourself. And if you purchase a 3-month gift membership to American Ancestors, you will receive a $5 gift certificate to our online bookstore. And if you purchase a full year gift membership, you would receive a $10 gift certificate to our online bookstore. And that offer expires at the end of this month, December 31st, 2020. And you can learn more by going to americanancestors.org. And I'll also be including this information in my follow-up email to you later today. So thank you again for joining us. As you leave the event, you'll have the opportunity to fill out a survey and give us your feedback. As we continue to expand our webinars and online offerings, any and all feedback is extremely helpful and appreciated. This free webinar was made possible by the generous support of members and friends around the world. Please consider making a gift to American Ancestors to keep these programs free and to create more free programs for you and others. If you'd like to access more how-to resources or learn about upcoming online educational programs, please visit our online learning center at americanancestors.org/education. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to see you at our online programs in the future. Goodbye for now.